أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك يا حبيب الله. Peace and blessings be upon you, Ya Rasulullah. Peace and blessings be upon you, O beloved of Allah. Sallallahu alayka ya mawlai. وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المعصومين من ولد الحسين. Peace and blessings be upon you, يا أبا عبد الله الحسين. Peace and blessings be upon you and on the Imams from your lineage. Sallallahu alayka ya mawlai wa ibn mawlai ya amir al-mu'mineen. Peace and blessings be upon you, O my master, and the son of my master, the master of the mu'mineen, Amir al-mu'mineen. Assalamu alayka ayyuha al-maqtul ghadra. السلام عليك أيها المغصوب حقا. السلام عليك أيها المقتول ببقعة شرفها الله. السلام عليك أيها المولود في بقعة أقامها الله له بيتا. Peace and blessings, O you. Peace and blessings be upon you, O you who was betrayed by his people. Peace and blessings be upon the one whose rights was taken away from him. Peace and blessings be upon the one that was killed in a city, in a piece of land that God himself blessed. Peace and blessings be upon the one who was born in the house of God, in a place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored with his magnificence. Peace and blessings be upon you, Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. For the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen وقائد الغر المحجلين إلى جنات النعيم, let's have a loud salawat على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل The second one for the love of Sayyidah Zahra alayha salam. Allahumma salli ala. And the last one for the love of Sahib al-Amr wa Zaman in your loudest voices. Allahumma salli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept your amal, to accept your fasting, to accept your salat, your prayers, to make us from those who benefit from this month through the love of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Yesterday, my brothers and sisters, we asked the question about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having a son. And we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot have a son, and not just that he does not have a son. And we distinguish between the two statements. We said does not have a son does not necessarily mean that he can't have a son. It more or less means that coincidentally or right now, in the moment, Allah ta'ala does not have a son. But it doesn't refute the idea, dismiss the idea that Allah ta'ala may have a son. When you say Allah ta'ala can't have a son, you're more or less saying God's place means that he will never have a son, cannot have a son, while he occupies the place that he has. Having a son for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately brings him down from the status of being a deity to the status of human beings. And so we said Allah ta'ala can't have a son because having a son is of the qualities of humans. And because humans naturally humanize God, they've accepted Allah ta'ala having a son. And that's why you find the idea of God having a son is so prevalent in many different religions that are with us and religions that are not around and not followed today. The idea that God has a son is not something that is new or specific to our fellow Christians. Rather, the idea has its place in modern Judaism, has its place in Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, has its place in Baha'ism, which essentially sprouted and is linked to Islam, came from Islam. Baha'u'llah was amongst Muslims in one way or another. Some may argue that Baha'ism is a very extreme sect of Islam. They believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And many, many different other ideas out there, theories out there, religions out there that are okay with this idea and accepting of it. We said Islam does not accept it for many reasons. One of them, as we said, when we bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to that level, we're essentially bringing him down to human beings, the level of human beings, and saying that he has a son. And the way that God creates, brings about creation, is not through the process of begetting, which results with offspring, you having a son. Rather, Allah Ta'ala's process is saying be, and it is. The process of begetting ultimately brings about offspring, which we call son or daughter. And the process of begetting is essentially the reproduction that animals go through to create other animals. By saying God has a son, you're bringing him down to the level of human beings. We also used a naqd example, an example to refute the idea. We said Adam alayhi salam, as mentioned in the Quran, is the best example against the idea that Jesus is the Son of God. Why? Because under the premise that Jesus is the Son of God because he does not have a father, then Adam should be the son of God because Adam does not have a father or a mother. So if the value system of a human being is whether they have a father or a mother or lack thereof, Adam should be higher than Jesus because Jesus rather has only a mother, not a father. Well, Adam has no mother, no father. And what shows the magnificence of God more is to create where the two counterparts that you need to create are not there, as opposed to having one of the two pieces of the puzzle and providing the other piece. So you find that the idea of having a son or Allah Ta'ala having a son is totally dismissed. And it is accepted because we as human beings have humanized Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we've done with many, many, many other issues pertaining to God. When it came to the body of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his being, how he is, when it came to his choices, when it came to his method and the way that he goes about dealing with human beings, oppressing them in some cases according to some sects of Islam, judging them in other cases, giving them free will versus force, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on. And so you find that if you want to pinpoint the major disease of many different religions and many different Islamic sects and their view to Allah, it's ultimately going to boil down to one idea, and that is God, the humanization of God, God's humanization by human beings. And that itself, my brothers and sisters, is a discussion. And we've given some examples. Other examples we've left out for time constraints. Inshallah, in the future, we can delve into this topic much more. Today's discussion, my brothers and sisters, is around a more practical topic. My brothers and sisters, Eid is in a couple days, depending on the moon. And as you know, when the day of Eid comes very close and Shahr Ramadan also comes close, the beginning of Shahr Ramadan, the Muslimin have moon wars. While everyone is discussing Star Wars, the Muslimin are sitting and having moon wars. It's a corny joke, but us in the Hausa, we laugh about it. So you guys are going to laugh at it with us. So we have moon wars. We have a war between ourselves. One is Eid. Is the moon there? Why do we have to see the moon? And then we start asking these questions. And it's not a problem to ask. The problem is when you have the wrong people trying to give answers. And so you find the layman's person sits down and tries to more or less put doubt and ask and debate on the topic when they have no ilm, they have no knowledge on the topic whatsoever. If it's a scholar discussing with another scholar, that's a different discussion. But you found that this issue of moon sighting, when the Eid is, why we do use this method and not that method, has become an issue that has caused divide within a community, and not just divide where you have with and against, rather a divide on a huge spectrum where in one city you might have 5 different parties all on the same issue. Not just this, it's caused the layman's person that has not studied the works of Ahlul Bayt or the words of Ahlul Bayt, the works of the scholars, to come and doubt in the integrity, the credibility, the reliability of our ulama, of our scholars, and ultimately degrade them. When I have a layman's person come sit down and say, what does Sayyid Fulani know about the technology of this age? He just sits in his house and doesn't go outside. He probably doesn't even know how a phone works. And you hear this. What does Sheikh Fulani know about moon sighting and NASA and the mathematics behind the calculation of where the moon is and how the moon is in its state at a specific time? Where are they from all of this? We need a modern marja. Oh my God, how many times I've heard this. We need a marja in the West, or we need a modern marja. Not dismissing that we could potentially have a marja in the West, inshallah, one day. We're not dismissing that. More or less, the idea that we need a modern marja. We need a marja that is more up to time. We need a marja that uses the technology that we have. We need a marja that stands in front of a computer like me and you and sits and tells you, I have come to my conclusion because of Dr. Albert and the University of Pennsylvania and Dr. Mandy and the University of Harvard University. They have come and they've given me this research and I have got to this conclusion because of their research. Oh, and I also used Wasa'il al-Shia and I also used Bihar al-Anwar. But we need a modern take. And so the integrity, the credibility of our ulama is always in question on this issue specifically. So you know what I'm going to do? We're going to put this to rest. Today, my brothers and sisters, we're going to discuss this topic, and tomorrow as well. But the discussion is not going to be about the ahkam. It's not going to be a look into what this marja said in his book of rules, nor is it going to be a look at what this marja said in his video. More or less, it's going to be, let's look at the ahadith themselves. I'm not a marja. I'm not a mujtahid. I'm nowhere near such a place. But the books are there. And alhamdulillah, in the Hausa here, we have a great library, as you can see behind me. And this is not just it. There's actually a whole nother wall full of books. The books that we have here are not the basic books. The books that we have are the books that the ulama use. We have Bihal Anwar, Wasail al-Shia, we have Al-Hada'iq by Sheikh al-Bahrani, and many other books that our ulama are using to ultimately give us our laws, ultimately arrive at Ahadith Ahl al-Bayt when it comes to Salat, when it comes to Sawm, when it comes to Hajj. We are going to be reading from the book Wasail al-Shia. Wasail al-Shia. This is how you know that there's a Hawza student that's reading the book, when you have papers and stuff all over the place. Wasail al-Shia, volume 10, Kitab al-Sawm. This is what we are going to be using in the discussion, inshallah. We'll read some of the ahadith, more or less put them in front of you, my brothers and sisters, and ultimately, present what our ulama use when they derive and give us the ahkam. Because there are some that are out there, as we said, not just doubt in the credibility. There are some that are out there that believe that our ulama, they are super confined by the traditions that they've been taught. When I mean traditions, I'm not saying hadith, just the traditions, the culture, the different biases that are out there. They're confined to these methods and they don't want to go away from them. And that's why they stick to the methods of the ulama that came before them. And that's why they ultimately tell us you must see the moon with your naked eye. As in, there are many that feel that our ulama are stuck in the past and don't want to use new methods because not because these new methods are not credible in the Sharia, rather these new methods to them are seen as something new and going away from the norm and what they've been taught for decades and for generations. And so many people think that when the alim writes a fatwa, behind that fatwa, there are biases, there are traditions, there are cultural influences, there are social conventions influencing. When the marja says yajib or yahrum, this is wajib or this is haram. Ultimately, this lecture, my brothers and sisters, is to destroy this notion. And this is what we are going to be discussing today, bi'awnillah ta'ala. We will begin, inshallah, with Allah, salawat ala Muhammad. Jameel. Now that we've introduced the topic, we've introduced the premise. Let's look at the issue from the very, very beginning, superficially. Before we delve into moon sighting and other topics surrounding Shahr Ramadan as a whole. When it comes to the fatwa of the marja, the ruling that a marja presents me and you, where does it get it from? We say there are four sources. Four sources for the marja's fatwa. Four. Please listen. The marja depends on these four when giving you a ruling. First one, and the first and foremost, is the Quran. The clear words of the Quran. Where in the Quran there are more than 500, I believe, or about 700 ayat that pertain to ahkam. We call them ayatul ahkam. The ayat, the verses that pertain to the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, aqimu salat. إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا كذا كذا كذا. Speaking of wudu, speaking of hajj, speaking of marriage, speaking of inheritance, speaking of sawm, other issues in the Quran that are mentioned and discussed, whether in depth, such as inheritance, or briefly, such as sawm, such as fasting. Jameel. The alim uses these ayat to get some of the ahkam. But as you know, 700 ayat don't give you all of your ahkam. In the Quran, there's about 6,000 some odd ayat. Out of those 6,000 ayat, about 700, 500 in that range are ayatul ahkam. Jameel. Meaning there has to be an alternative source. What is that alternative source? We come to the second, which is the sunnah. What's the sunnah? The sunnah is comprised of three things. Stay with me. We say, قول المعصوم, فعل المعصوم, تقرير المعصوم. I want you to stay with me, please. The first one, the words of the ma'soom, what he says, or she, alayha salamullah, says. Number two, فعل المعصوم, the action of the ma'soom. What the ma'soom does. It doesn't say anything, but he does something. The riwayah says, by Hamid ibn Muslim, I saw the imam walk into the masjid. He came to the place where they do wudu, the well of the masjid. He took water in his right hand. He washed his face in this manner. He washed his arms in this manner. He wiped his head in this manner and wiped his feet in this manner. And then the imam walked away. Did he say anything to Hamid ibn Muslim? No. Or not Hamid Muslim, afwan. To any of the other ashab. Hamid ibn Muslim is not one of the ashab. Afwan, sorry. Any one of the other ashab. Jameel. This is action of the ma'soom. Zurara, for example. These are the actions of the ma'soomin. Jameel, they didn't say anything. طيب, تقرير المعصوم. What's تقرير المعصوم? تقرير المعصوم is the acceptance of the ma'soom to a certain action. What do I mean? Let's say we have a riwayah that says, Zurara says, I stood in front of Imam al-Sadiq and I began to do wudu. I poured the water in my right hand as the Imam watched. I washed my face and then I washed my hands. Then I wiped my head. Then I wiped my feet. The Imam watched me the entire time. After I finished, the Imam looked at me, didn't do anything, didn't say anything, and walked away. If I made a mistake, the Imam should have said something. That is the acceptance of the ma'soom. Taqreerul ma'soom. Jameel. This is the sunnah. Then we have third one. Al-aql, the intellect, can be used in very, very, very specific circumstances. Like what? Like, for example, if you can't walk, you can't stand. Let's say you have no legs, or your legs are, there's something wrong with your legs, and you can't stand. Wal-'ayadh billah, ba'ad al-shar. Would it be logical for Allah Ta'ala to tell you to stand during salat? No. Do you need the Quran to tell you this? No. Do you need a hadith to tell you this? No. You can tell me, because it will be unjust. I'm unable to stand. Does it make sense for God to tell me that I have to stand during salat? No, I have to sit down. Well, if he commands me to stand and punishes me for not standing, I can go back and say, Ya Allah, you didn't give me the ability to stand, but then you ask me to stand. That's not fair, because it goes against the fundamentals of justice. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not make a person stand if they're unable to stand and do something that they're not able to do. There we go. Me and you just derived the law. We didn't need the Quran, nor do we need the hadith. This is aql. Lastly, al-ijma', consensus. The consensus of the ulama and ultimately the Imam alayhi salam between them. This one is theoretical and not practical. Not practical. So the practical ones are the three. The last one, the consensus, is not practical. It's very theoretical. I don't want to discuss why. Regardless, three. Quran, hadith, or Quran, sunnah, and aql. So when it comes to the law, is there any place for bias within these three? No. There's no place for bias. He's reading the hukum that is given to him by the Imam in the hadith. He's opening the Quran. The Quran says, do this. He tells you, this is the hukum. Aql, in very specific circumstances where literally, the intrinsic property plays, where A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. Simple. Logic that me and you could follow. And other aspects as well. Sometimes the logic is more complex. But ultimately, it's logic that can be accepted and simple. The logic here has no place for bias. It's objective, not subjective. So there's no place for the marja to come and say, in my opinion, and my personal opinion. And the difference between the ulama is not based on personal opinions. Rather, it's based on certain discrepancies, difference of opinion regarding the scriptures, regarding the texts. Not regarding outside influences. That is one thing to understand. That's muqaddim al-ula. That's the first introduction. The second point that needs to be understood before we discuss what we find in Wasail al-Shia is that in our religion, in the ahadith, in the works of the ulama, from day one, from Sheikh al-Mufid until Sayyid al-Hakim, today. So what, 1,200 years or so? The ulama have been in agreement that the method that you pinpoint, the beginning of Shahr Ramadan, to the end of Shahr Ramadan is by seeing the moon. And the words of mathematicians, astronomers, etc., 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 is not to be taken. This is their word. It's written in gold. It's one of the things, one of the, I don't want to say little things, but one of the main things that the ulama agree upon. The scholars differ on some issues. On this issue, because of how fundamental it is, our scholars throughout history did not have discussion about it. Our scholars throughout history, I don't even want to say the majority. I have not heard of a scholar before more or less today's time discuss whether you're allowed to use these different methods or not in history. Jameel. When you come and you ask the ulama, طيب, why? Before they tell you the ahkam, before they tell you وسائل الشيعة بحار الأنوار الكافي, before they say these, من لا يحضره الفقيه, before they say hadith, they come tell you something. Listen, they say this. Our religion, please listen. Our religion is on par and directly intertwined with the natural world around us. We agree. All of us agree on this issue. That our religion is naturally intertwined with the natural world around us. Where? You have the obligations in their times are based on the natural occurrences in the outside world. Yes? So you have, for example, I gotta plug this thing in. So, for example, we have Hajj once a year. When do we go to Hajj? When it's Dhul Hajjah. When is Dhul Hajjah? When the moon is in a certain place in the sky and shows itself in a certain way, 8 days after that day or 10 days after that day is when we have to do Hajj, or what Hajj essentially finishes. Jameel. So during that week, during that time period, that's once in a lifetime. Once a year, Shahr Ramadan also is dependent on the moon. Once a week, when it's Friday. When is Friday? Between Thursday and Saturday. It's the day of the week. When we have then ahkam once a day or 5 times a day for salat. When do I pray? When it's Fajr, when this is happening in the sky. When it's Dhuhr, when this is happening in the sky. When the sun is in this certain situation, and it shows itself in this way. When is Maghrib time? Well, when the sun goes down. When is Isha time? The mustahab time for Isha. Wallah, when you see this in the sky. So the natural occurrences of the world around us indicate for us the times of the obligations that we must come forward into. So you find that this pattern, this correlation between the obligation and the natural occurrences of the world around us is seen very clearly in our Sharia. There's that correlation, and that pattern is seen. Jameel. The same way that the obligation must be clear for the individual, it must be clear for the layman's person. You found that the Sharia gave the layman's person also a clear indication for when they must do that obligation. Stay with me. Very important. Salat al-Dhuhr, for example. The Sharia said, listen, all you have to do, and this is in the riwayat, all you have to do, put a stick in the ground. When this stick's shadow starts to point towards the east, then you know Salat al-Dhuhr. Because the sun was over top the stick, and when it starts to set towards the west, that means the shadow of the stick must be going towards the east. When it goes towards the east, pray. Sharia has given us very, very, very simple methods to pinpoint when our obligations begin. Clear? Very clear, inshallah. Jameel. When it comes to Shahr Ramadan, the same exact method and the same exact rules apply. That when Shahr Ramadan begins and when it ends must be clear for everyone, not just the experts. This is something more clear. Jameel, Jameel. Before the age of the computer, before the age of the cell phone, huh? Before the different methods of communication, those that were able to calculate when the moon is going to be in the specific place, or calculate when the birth of the moon is going to be, were they the experts or the layman's person? Or how about now? I tell you, Khayy, calculate when Shahr Ramadan is going to end for me. Can you do it? No. You go on NASA or whatever website and you say, oh, they say it's this. But you're not an expert, therefore you can't calculate it, so you have to go to an expert. Does it make sense that for you to know your obligation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs you to refer to an expert, when in all other obligations He gave you a clear-cut, simple method? Every other obligation, there's a clear-cut, simple method. Why when Shahr Ramadan comes, we have to refer to an expert? When the amal, the obligation, is an individual obligation. So I should have, as an individual, the methodology to pinpoint when my obligation begins. If that's not the case, then you can make the argument. You can make the argument that's unfair. I have to refer to an expert to tell me when the beginning of the month is. That's not unfair. It's hard. It's hardship. Also, it's hard. Why is it for every other obligation, it's very simple. But when it comes to Shahr Ramadan, I have to refer to an expert that has to sit down and calculate for me. Why? Why is it so different? Is it fair? Today it's easy. Today, because you have internet, it's easy. Okay, imagine the internet shuts down and you have no more Wi-Fi and you can't talk to people in California that are sitting there and doing these calculations for you. What do you do? Honestly, if the method is by calculation, like what do you do in that case? Okay, you live in Dearborn. I live in Windsor. The border's shut. You live 20 minutes away from me. Literally 20 minutes. If I hop in my car 20 minutes, I'm at your doorstep. But I can't get to you. I'm the expert in calculation. I'm an astronomer. I want to come tell you, Ya Khayya, Ya Ali, Ya Hussein, Ya Habibi, Albi. This is when the Shahr Ramadan begins. This is when it ends, Ya Khayya. And we don't have owls. I can't send an owl over the border. And I can't send a text message. I can't call you. There's no other means other than me coming and telling you. This is how it was. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. This is a logical approach. Debatable, not debatable. Let's look at the ahkam of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. Go to Wasail al-Shia. Come with me to Wasail al-Shia. Page 252 in Wasail al-Shia. Page 252 in Wasail al-Shia. What's the title? By the way, Wasail al-Shia is by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Hussein al-Amri, one of the greatest of our ulama. Jamil, just for reference. What does he say? What does he say in Wasail al-Shia? What does he put these set of ahadith under? Look at the title. Bab, the chapter. أن علامة شهر رمضان وغيره رؤية الهلال فلا يجب الصوم إلا للرؤية. The door, the chapter that discusses and shows that the beginning of Shahr Ramadan and other months is by sight, seeing them. Dun al-dhann, until he says, and not any other method, not a method of what we call dhann. So doubtful methods or methods that don't give you certainty, such as sight. In other words, not any other method. Not any other method. Look at the first hadith. Look at the first hadith. عن الحلبي عن أبي عبد الله الصادق قال أنه سئل عن الأهلة. He was asked about the moon sighting. فقال هي أهلة الشهور. They are the moons of the months. فإذا رأيت الهلال فصم وإذا رأيته فافطر. If you see the moon, fast. If you see the moon, break your fast. Like number 2. I'm going to read them and then we're going to present what we found. عن أبي جعفر عن محمد بن مسلم عن أبي جعفر is Imam al-Baqir عليه السلام قال إذا رأيتم الهلال فصوموا. If you see the moon, fast. وإذا رأيتموه فافطروا. And if you see the moon, break your fast. وليس بالرأي ولا التظني ولكن الرؤية. Clearer than that. It is not by doubt, nor is it by opinion. Rather, it is by sight. And by the way, when the Imam alayhi salam speaks in this manner, he says it's not this, not this, not this. He's essentially telling you, don't bring anything more than what I'm telling you. I'm telling you this. Don't tell me what about this, what about that. I'm telling you this. Don't give me other options because I'm dismissing them for you. Essentially, I'm dismissing your options. This is the one. That's number 2. Go to hadith number 5 in this same chapter. عن أبي الحسن الرضا عليه السلام إمام رضا قال صوموا للرؤيا وأفطروا للرؤيا. Famous hadith. Fast for what you see and break your fast for what you see. طيب. More or less they say that they're saying the same thing until we get to 11. Look what 11 says. Hadith 11. عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام أنه قال في كتاب علي. Imam al-Sadiq says in the book of Amir al-Mu'mineen, in the book of Ali, it is written صم لرؤيته وأفطر لرؤيته. Fast when you see the moon. Break your fast when you see the moon. وإياك والشك والظن. And stay away from doubt and saying maybe and I think and according to what I see. فإن خفي عليكم فأتموا الشهر الأول. If you don't see the moon. فإن خفي عليكم يعني إن خفي عليكم القمر. And if the moon does not show itself to you. If the moon doesn't show itself to you. Simple, straightforward. If the moon does not show itself to you, then fast until the 30th day. You know how many times you hear, oh, the Sayyid wants us to fast an extra day now? You know, it's as if it's the Sayyid's fault. The Sayyid just wants to make us fast an extra day. What is this? The person doesn't want to fast. I mean, it's very clear. It's very simple, clear cut. This person doesn't want to fast. When Shahr Ramadan comes, he starts to blow and huff and puff. That's it. You want to fast one extra day. You know it's mustahab to fast an extra 6 days after Shahr Ramadan, according to some. Like, it's not about huffing and puffing, brothers and sisters. It's about the hukum. It's not the Sayyid's fault, nor is it the Sheikh's fault. Nor is it Ayatullah's fault, nor is it Sheikh Fulan's fault. This is just their opinion. And according to hadith, if you don't see it, go to the 30th day. After the 30th day, ayadna khalasna. It's done. It's done. No more, no less. Like, and he keeps going. He keeps listing. Brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. In this chapter by itself, that lists multiple imams saying you must see the moon with your eye, there are 28 ahadith that say the word ar-ru'ya, sight. 28 ahadith. Here you go. 28. So you find that the Imams alayhimus salam made it clear from day one that it must be seen with the naked eye. Tayyib. You tell me, okay, but today we have different methods. And these methods tell us when the beginning or when the moon is born, not just by the hour, by the minute and the second. More than this, I'll tell you number one, is that if you go on NASA right now, every month, just see, when is the moon going to be born? Like when you see the moon is going to be born on Monday, masalan, June 5th, let's say, Monday, June 5th, at 1:52 p.m. Go check. The moon will be born on Monday at 1:52 p.m. When is 1:52 p.m.? Is that at night or the day? That's in the day. Like if it's in the day, how does that work? How does that work for you? And how did that work for the Imams alayhimus salam, or people 500 years ago? That they were supposed to know that the moon was born at dhuhr time. And not just this. How would you apply the hukum here? The moon is born literally midday. So it's not by when the moon is born. It's not by when the moon is born. It's not specifically when the moon is born, because if it's specifically when the moon is born, like it's born in the middle of the day. It's not specifically when the moon is born. No, the moon must be in a specific manner, must show itself in a specific way, must be in a specific image. And the way you know that the moon is in that image is by seeing it. It's by seeing it. That's number one. Number two, who said that these methods are new? Who said that these methods are new? Brothers and sisters, go look into the history of civilizations before ours. How did they used to pinpoint the beginning of the months? Their month, did they have a calendar like ours? They used to use moon sighting. And they had specific calendars to tell them the beginning and the end of the month. They had. Some of them dating back to 8,000 years BCE. 8,000 years, yeah, about 10,000 years ago. About 10,000 years ago. It is said that one of these calendars that pinpoint the beginning and the end of the moon, that essentially calculate when the moon is going to be born, essentially when the new moon is going to be born, were found in the fields of Scotland, and they dated back 8,000 BCE, 10,000 years ago. These methods were there. Not just this. These methods were there, and the Imams knew that they were there. And with that, they told us you can't use them. Hadith. Let me get you the hadith. Read with me. Wasail al-Shia, page 297. Again, I'm not giving you dalil. This is not my dalil. I'm not a marja, nor am I mushtahid, but I'm more or less just presenting these to you so that we have confidence in the work of our muraja, and we just let this issue die. Each person يعيد على مرجعه. Each person just have Eid with your marja, and that's it. You agree, you disagree, you like, you don't like, it's up to you. But in the end, let's stop making this a real issue for us as Shias. Let's put it to rest. Look at the hadith. باب أنه لا عبرة بإخبار المنجمين وأهل الحساب أنه يرى. Literally, the door, the chapter in which the Imam says you cannot depend on the astronomers and those that are calculating for you when the beginning of the month is and telling you that it could be seen. Look at the riwayah. قال كتب إليه أبو عمر أخبرني يا مولاي. A man writes and says, tell me, oh my master, أنه ربما أشكل علينا هلال شهر رمضان فلا نراه ونرى السماء ليست فيها علة. We doubt when the beginning of Shahr Ramadan is. And we look at the sky, like we don't see anything. لا نرى فيها علة ليست فيها علة. There's nothing, no indication. ويفطر الناس ونفطر معهم. So we break our fast, essentially we don't fast because we don't know that it's the beginning of Shahr Ramadan. We haven't seen the moon. So we go about our day. We consider it Sha'ban. وَنَفْطِرْ مَعَهُمْ. We break our fast with the people, or we don't fast essentially. وَيَقُولُ قَوْمٌ مِنَ الْحُسَّابِ قِبَلَنَا. Then we have experts of astronomy, mathematicians, come to us and tell us إِنَّهُ يُرَى فِي تِلْكَ اللَّيْلَ بِعَيْنِهَا بِمَصْرِ وَأَفْرِيقِيَا وَالْأَنْدَلُسِ. The moon can be seen in this night in Africa, in Egypt, in other parts of the world. فلا يجوز فهل يجوز يا مولاي ما قال الحساب في هذا الباب. Can we depend on what they said? Can we use what they said? حتى يختلف الفرض على أهل الأمصار فيكون صومهم خلاف صومنا, etc., etc., وفطرهم خلاف فطرنا. Essentially, can we depend on what they say so we can all be together? Can we depend on what they say? Because if it's seen in Egypt and they're مثلا in Medina, let's say, if it's seen in Egypt and they're in Medina, Egypt and Medina are they're a bit close together. Yes, they're a bit close together. Meaning we can probably depend on what they're saying. Can we use what they have found? Look what the answer comes back as. لا تصومن الشك. أفطر لرؤيته وصم لرؤيته. Do do not fast the day of doubt. What's the Imam essentially saying? He's saying these methods in the Sharia equal doubt, equal dhan. And the Imam alayhi salam before, amongst the 28 ahadith that he tells you fast to see it, he says, La tasumanna shak. Do not fast the day of doubt. Do not go by a dhan. He doesn't even say dhan. What's dhan? Dhan is 51% and more. That you have a hunch. Like he here calls it shak. Doesn't call it doubt. He calls it doubt. What's doubt? Doubt is like 50%. It's like maybe, maybe not. Hunch is like I'm leaning towards. He doesn't even call it a hunch. He calls it doubt. لا تصومن الشك أفطر لرؤيته وصم لرؤيته. Fast for when you see it. Break your fast for when you see it. These methods were there. The logic behind this. The logic. How is it that the Imams alayhimus salam had this? I'll tell you. Listen. Civilizations of India, stay with me. Civilizations of India and other parts of the world had these different methods. And not just had these different methods. We're using them for generations. Jameel. How did they make their way into the Arabian Peninsula? How did they make their way into the hands of the Muslims? Either one of two. The Muslims themselves developed them. The Arabians developed them. They had these methods, or they were influenced by those that were outside. Jameel. If they were influenced by those from India and other parts of the world, when they got to the hands of the Muslims, how were they able to decipher? How were they able to use them then? Because it was in the language of the Indians. We say around the time of Imam al-Sadiq and even up to the time of Imam al-Rida, maybe. But starting for sure from the Imam al-Sadiq's time. It was what we called Asr al-Tarjama. What's Asr al-Tarjama? Asr al-Tarjama is when the Muslims began to be influenced by the countries around them. Specifically from India. Indian philosophers, Indian mathematicians, Indian mystics, etc. Different Indian influences and knowledge were coming and making their way into the hands of the Muslims. And those works were being translated into Arabic. So they called it Asr al-Tarjama. That's why at the time of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, many different Islamic sects came to being and were born. Many different Islamic groups were born at the time of Imam al-Sadiq. Why? Was it just coincidental? No. They were reading the works of Indian philosophers, Hindu philosophers, and trying to make them fit within Islamic ideals. Trying to bring the two together. Trying to make one complement the other and not contradict. So you found a lot of new sects and new ideas were being spread around in the Islamic peninsula at the time. And so the Muslims, if they didn't have such technology, they got it from India and other parts of the world in this time period. And so you see the Imam alayhi salam that tells you can't use these methods. You can't depend on shak. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, right? Because these questions were being posed to them. What is happening today is not new. It's not new. It's happened. And the ulama were very clear on this. Our scholars are very clear. Go to Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani's book, Minhaj al-Salihin, Mabani al-Minhaj. Go to Al-Urwa al-Wuthqa. Go to Masalik al-Afham. Go to. Put aside those. Go to Al-Kafi. Go to Bihar al-Anwar, although Bihar al-Anwar is an encyclopedia. But go to Bihar al-Anwar. See what you find in Bihar al-Anwar. See what you find in Man La Yahdaruhu al-Faqih. Mishkat al-Anwar. All of these other different books. So find them and see what they say. You will find the same exact message. Fast and break your fast. Depending on what you see. Depending on what you see in the sky. If it shows itself, it shows itself. It doesn't show itself, it doesn't show itself. You, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have no obligation. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. نسأله تعالى أن يعفو عنا ويغفر لنا ويرحمنا إنه نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل